If someone had told me that agreeing to let a stranger move into my apartment would ruin my sanity and possibly my credit score, I would have laughed in their face. And yet here we are. It started innocently enough. My best friend Jess sent me a link to a roommate finder site, and after scrolling through pages of nightmare candidates, including one guy who proudly listed snake breeding as a hobby, I found a profile that didn't make me want to bleach my eyeballs. *name *Nate Carter. *age 28. *occupation freelance something. Not ominous at all. *hobbies cooking, nice, music, cool, occasionally bad decisions, oh. I should have known. But rent in this city is higher than my student loan balance, and my job at the publishing house barely covers half. So when he showed up for the interview with an easy grin and a six-pack of craft beer as a thank you, I ignored the voice in my head screaming, "Run, Sasha, run." The first red flag happened on move-in day. "Hey, do you mind if I bring a few plants?" Nate had texted me earlier that week. A few turned out to mean 37. And not tiny succulents either, we're talking jungle-level greenery. By the time he finished arranging them, my minimalist living room looked like the Amazon rainforest, and I half expected to see a parrot fly by. "Plants purify the air," he said with that infuriating grin. "You're welcome." I tried to smile, but deep down I was already picturing my security deposit vanishing into a puddle of spilled potting soil. The second red flag? His nightly music sessions. On his profile, he'd written, "plays guitar," which I naively assumed meant casual strumming. In reality, Nate treated our paper-thin walls like his personal concert hall, wailing indie rock ballads at full volume until 2 in the morning. The first night, I knocked on his door and politely asked if he could keep it down. He nodded, apologized, and, I kid you not, handed me earplugs. "Just in case," he said. By the fourth night, I was fantasizing about smashing that guitar over his perfectly tousled head. And then came the kitchen incident. I woke up one Saturday to the smell of something burning. Heart pounding, I rushed into the kitchen to find Nate standing shirtless, because of course he was, waving a dish towel at what used to be my toaster. "Good news," he said sheepishly. "We don't have ants anymore." "Bad news?" "I might have accidentally set your toaster on fire trying to make experimental s'mores." I stared at him, speechless. "Want coffee?" he added, as if caffeine would fix the charred appliance still smoking behind him. But the worst, and by worst, I mean most unhinged, moment happened 2 weeks later. I came home after a brutal day at work, dreaming of pajamas and Netflix, only to find a stranger in my living room. A very large, very intimidating stranger. Hi," I said, clutching my purse like a weapon. "Who are you?" "Tony," the man grunted. Before I could dial 911, Nate appeared, grinning like an idiot. "Oh, hey, Sash. This is Tony. He's my, boxing coach. Hope you don't mind, we're just sparring a little." Sparring? In my living room. Which, by the way, is approximately the size of a shoebox. I didn't even have the energy to argue. I just turned around, walked to my bedroom, and slammed the door before I said something that would get me evicted. The thing is, as much as I wanted to hate him, and believe me, I tried, Nate had this annoying habit of being likable. Like the time my boss chewed me out for missing a typo in a manuscript and I came home ready to cry into a pint of ice cream. Nate didn't say anything, just queued up my favorite cheesy rom-com and slid a glass of wine across the coffee table. Or the morning my car wouldn't start and I was late for work, he tossed me his keys without hesitation. "Take mine," he said. "Just don't judge the empty Red Bull cans." And then there was the night we got locked out of the building because the landlord finally changed the security code and forgot to tell us. It was raining, we were both freezing, and while we waited for the locksmith, Nate launched into this ridiculous story about how he once got stuck in a porta potty at a music festival. I laughed so hard I forgot I was shivering. Still, there were moments that made me question my life choices. Like when I woke up at 3 a.m. to find him in the kitchen, shirtless again. Does this man even own a shirt, dancing to some old 80s track while flipping pancakes? "What are you doing?" I groaned, rubbing my eyes. "Breakfast," he said cheerfully. "Want some?" "Nate, it's 3 in the morning." "Exactly," he said, as if that explained everything. Then, there was the closet incident. I had a date, a rare, miracle-level event, and needed my favorite black heels. Except they weren't in the closet. Or the bedroom. Or anywhere in the apartment. I finally found them in the bathroom, of all places, covered in glitter. "Nate!" I screeched. He appeared in the doorway, sheepish. "Okay, so, funny story. Tony's girlfriend needed shoes for a costume party, and yours were perfect." I didn't even let him finish. "Do I want to know why they're covered in glitter?" "No," he said quickly. "Definitely not." By the end of the first month, I'd come up with a list of Nate rules, which I taped to the fridge. 1. No sparring in the living room. 2. No midnight concerts. 3. No borrowing my stuff without asking. 4. Shirts are mandatory in common areas. He signed it with a dramatic flourish, then promptly ignored half the rules. The turning point, the moment when everything shifted, happened one Friday night. I'd just gotten dumped by text. By text. After 3 dates with a guy who'd claimed to be different. I was curled up on the couch, mascara smudged, clutching a tub of cookie dough like it was my emotional support animal, when Nate walked in. "Whoa," he said softly, eyes scanning my blotchy face. "Who do I have to kill?" I tried to laugh, but it came out as a choked sob. Without another word, he sat beside me, grabbed a spoon, and dug into the cookie dough. "Guy's an idiot," he said finally. You." I blinked at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" He met my gaze, and for once, there was no smirk, no joke, just something quiet and serious. "It means you're smart, and funny, and way too good for someone who thinks it's okay to dump you over text," he said. My chest tightened, and for one dizzying second, I forgot how to breathe. Then he smiled, soft and lopsided. "Also, I'd totally dump you in person. I'm classy like that." I threw a pillow at him, laughing through my tears, and just like that, the moment passed. But something shifted that night. Something I didn't want to admit, even to myself. The next morning, I caught myself watching him as he made coffee, sunlight streaming through the window and catching in his messy hair. And instead of thinking, "God, this man is ruining my life," all I could think was, "God, I'm in trouble." If you've ever tried to convince yourself you aren't falling for someone you live with, let me tell you, it's a losing battle. Every time I walked into the kitchen and saw Nate leaning against the counter, hair damp from a shower, sipping coffee like some kind of rom-com lead, my brain screamed, nope. Absolutely not. Abort mission, And every time, my heart ignored me. The universe, of course, found this hilarious and decided to crank the chaos up to 11. It started on a Tuesday. I'd had one of those days where everything went wrong: late bus, spilled latte, an email chain from my boss accusing me of not respecting the Oxford comma, the works. I got home, ready to collapse into my couch cocoon, only to find Nate standing in the kitchen with a woman. A gorgeous, model-level woman. She was tall, blonde, and wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Oh, hey, Sash," Nate said casually, like this wasn't an absolute nightmare. "This is Brooke. Brooke, this is my roommate, Sasha." "Hi," Brooke chirped, flashing me a blinding smile. "Nate's told me so much about you." "Oh, has he?" I plastered on my best fake grin, muttered something about deadlines, and fled to my room, where I proceeded to sulk like a 12-year-old. For the rest of the evening, I listened to their laughter echo through the apartment, each giggle like a tiny dagger to my chest. By the time the front door finally closed, I'd worked myself into a full spiral. He was dating. Of course he was dating. He was tall, charming, and had that stupid smile that made you forget how to use words. Why wouldn't someone like Brooke fall for that? And why did it feel like my heart had been fed through a paper shredder? The next morning, I avoided him entirely. Left for work early, skipped my usual coffee, even took the long route home in case he was around. But Nate, being Nate, didn't let it slide. By Thursday night, he cornered me in the kitchen while I was making tea. "Okay," he said, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "What's up with you?" "Nothing," I said, focusing very hard on the tea bag in my hand. "Right," he said slowly. "Nothing. Which totally explains why you've been acting like I have the plague." I opened my mouth, ready to deny it again, but then he tilted his head and gave me that look, the one that made it feel like he could see straight through me. And I panicked. "Maybe I just like peace and quiet for once," I snapped, slamming the mug on the counter. His brows shot up. "Wow. Okay, noted." And then, instead of fighting back, he just walked away. Which somehow made me feel even worse. A few days later, Brooke was gone. No explanation, no big breakup scene, just gone. I found out when I came home to find Nate on the couch, staring blankly at a muted football game. "You okay?" I asked cautiously. He shrugged, not looking at me. "Yeah. Brooke and I weren't, serious." "Oh," I said, unsure what else to offer. For a moment, the silence stretched between us, heavy and strange. Then he glanced at me, forcing a grin. "Wanna order pizza?" And just like that, the wall between us cracked, even if only a little. Things settled back into a weird almost normal after that. We were back to late-night pancake sessions, sarcastic banter, and his relentless attempts to make me laugh when I was stressed. Like the time he showed up at my office during lunch with a paper bag and a sheepish grin. "You looked like you were about to commit corporate homicide this morning," he said, handing me a burger and fries. Figured I'd save you from a life sentence. Or the Saturday he dragged me to the park for an impromptu picnic because, as he put it, vitamin D is important, and you look like you've been living in a cave. I rolled my eyes, but the truth was, I didn't hate it. Then came the night everything shifted, again. Jess had invited me to a party, and for once, I actually felt like going. I even wore the red dress that always made me feel like my most confident self. When I walked out of my room, Nate froze mid-sentence. "Whoa," he said, eyes widening. "What?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You look," he trailed off, then cleared his throat. "Good. Really good." Something fluttered in my chest, but I forced a smile. "Thanks. Don't wait up." The party was fine. Drinks, dancing, some light flirting with a guy whose name I promptly forgot. But the whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about Nate. About the way his gaze had lingered just a second too long. By the time I got home, tipsy and tired, it was past midnight. Nate was still awake, sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Hey," he said softly as I kicked off my heels. "Have fun?" "Yeah," I said, collapsing next to him. "It was fine." We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the fridge the only sound in the apartment. Then he looked at me, really looked, and something in the air shifted. Before I could second-guess it, he leaned in. And kissed me. It wasn't some dramatic, fireworks exploding moment. It was soft, tentative, like he was asking a question. And God help me, I answered. The next morning, reality came crashing back. I woke up in my own bed, head pounding, heart racing. What had we done? More importantly, what did it mean? I avoided him all morning, burying myself in laundry and urgent emails. By noon, there was a knock on my bedroom door. "Sash," Nate said, his voice cautious. "Can we talk?" I opened the door just enough to see him standing there, hands shoved in his pockets, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. "About last night," he started. I braced myself. This was it. The speech. The "you're great but I don't do relationships" cliché. But instead, he said, "I like you. Like, really like you. And if that freaks you out, tell me, and we can pretend last night didn't happen. But I don't want to." My brain short-circuited. "You, what?" I managed. He smiled, small and earnest. "I like you, Sasha. I think I have for a while." For a second, all I could do was stare at him, trying to process the words. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I stepped forward and kissed him. And just like that, the thing I'd been fighting, the thing I'd been terrified to admit, wasn't a maybe anymore. Living with Nate after that was complicated. There were stolen kisses in the kitchen, lingering touches in the hallway, and a lot of whispered late-night conversations that made my chest ache in the best way. But there were also moments of doubt. Like the time I found a note from some girl in his jacket pocket, just a phone number and a heart, and spent the whole night spiraling before realizing it was from months ago. Or when Jess found out and immediately launched into a lecture about how dating your roommate was a disaster waiting to happen. "Best case scenario, you break up and have to live together awkwardly," she'd said. "Worst case, you break up and he steals your Netflix password." I'd laughed it off, but her words lingered, buzzing in the back of my mind like an annoying mosquito. Then came the fight. It started over something stupid, dirty dishes, of all things. "You can't just leave stuff in the sink for days," I snapped, slamming the sponge down. "I was busy." Nate shot back. "With what? Another midnight jam session?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Where is this coming from?" And before I could stop myself, everything I'd been bottling up spilled out, the fears, the insecurities, the constant nagging worry that I was just some temporary distraction until someone better came along. He stared at me, stunned. "You really think that?" he asked quietly. I wanted to take it back, to swallow the words and pretend they'd never left my mouth, but it was too late. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then he muttered, "I need some air," and walked out. The slam of the door echoed like a gunshot. That night was the longest of my life. Every sound made me think he'd come back, but the apartment stayed silent, empty in a way that made my chest ache. I barely slept, replaying the fight over and over until my brain felt like static. When the sun finally came up, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the mug of untouched coffee in front of me, wondering if I'd just ruined the best thing that had ever happened to me. By the time the clock hit noon, I was convinced Nate wasn't coming back. I'd texted him, twice. One was a pathetic "hey," the other a slightly less pathetic "can we talk?" Both were met with the same infuriating nothing. Jess called around too, probably sensing my emotional breakdown through whatever psychic twin flame bond best friends have. So, she started cheerfully, "Have you set his guitar on fire yet, or are we still in the crying on the bathroom floor phase?" "Neither," I muttered, staring at the cold cup of coffee I'd been nursing for 3 hours. "Oh, honey," she sighed. "Do you want me to come over?" I'll bring wine and a taser. No, Jess, I said, rubbing my temples. I need to fix this. Well, duh, she said. But maybe try, I don't know, talking to him instead of stewing in your guilt like a sad lasagna. Helpful as always, I deadpanned. Call me when you're ready to beg for forgiveness, she said. I want updates. By the time Nate finally walked through the door that evening, I'd run through at least 50 different apology speeches in my head. None of them sounded less pathetic than the last. He didn't look angry when he came in, just tired. Like he'd been carrying the weight of the world all day and didn't know where to put it down. Nate, I started, standing too quickly. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. He didn't say anything, just dropped his keys in the bowl by the door and looked at me, waiting. I'm sorry, I blurted out. For what I said? For all of it. Sash, he interrupted, his voice quiet but steady. Do you really think I don't care about you? I froze, words dying in my throat. Because if you do, he continued, then I'm doing a terrible job showing you how much you mean to me. And that's on me. Nate. No, he said, shaking his head. You need to hear this. You're not some placeholder. You're not a distraction. You're it. For me. And yeah, maybe that scares the hell out of me, but it's true. My vision blurred, stupid tears welling up before I could stop them. I don't want anyone else, he said simply. Just you. For a second, all I could do was stand there, heart threatening to explode out of my chest. And then I crossed the room and kissed him like my life depended on it. The days that followed were different. Not in a big, dramatic way. More like everything had shifted a few degrees toward something warmer, steadier. Nate still left his socks in the living room. I still hogged the blankets. But now there were sleepy morning kisses, random midday texts that made me smile like an idiot, and late night talks about everything and nothing. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. Of course, life being life, the other shoe inevitably did drop. It happened on a Friday night, 2 weeks later. Jess had dragged me out for drinks, insisting I needed girl time that didn't involve staring dreamily at my roommate-turned-boyfriend. By the time I stumbled home, tipsy and humming along to some pop song stuck in my head, I was ready to collapse into bed. But when I opened the apartment door, I froze. There, sitting on the couch, was Nate. And next to him was a woman. Not Brooke, but someone new. Dark hair, sharp smile, effortlessly gorgeous. Oh, I said, my voice coming out way too high. Hi. Nate jumped up so fast he almost tripped over the coffee table. Sash, hey. This is, I'm Lila, the woman said smoothly, standing and extending a hand. Old friend of Nate's. Right, I said, ignoring her hand. Old friend. I didn't wait for an explanation. I just stormed down the hall, slammed my bedroom door, and locked it. 2 minutes later, there was a soft knock. Sash, Nate called, his voice muffled through the door. Can we talk? Go talk to your old friend, I snapped. There was a pause. Then, she's my cousin. I froze. What? She's my cousin, he repeated, exasperation creeping into his voice. She's in town for a conference and needed a place to crash. I was literally making her tea when you walked in. Oh, I said, feeling my face flush hot with embarrassment. The door cracked open, and there he was, leaning against the frame, arms crossed, trying very hard not to laugh. You done assuming the worst? He asked gently. I groaned and buried my face in my hands. I hate myself. You're cute when you're jealous, he teased, stepping closer. I'm not jealous, I mumbled into my palms. Right, he said, smirking. And I'm not completely in love with you. My head snapped up, eyes wide. You, what? The smirk faded, replaced by something softer. You heard me. For once in my life, I was completely speechless. Say something, he said, almost nervously. I swallowed hard. I love you, too. The grin that broke across his face could have powered the entire city. After that, it felt like everything finally settled. We found our rhythm, shared grocery runs, weekend movie marathons, the occasional screaming match over whose turn it was to do laundry. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and loud and sometimes exhausting. But it was ours. The night it really hit me that this, was it for me was stupidly ordinary. We were sitting on the couch, him with his guitar, me curled up with a book. The TV was playing some mindless reality show in the background, and the city lights spilled through the window, painting the room in soft gold. At one point, he looked up, caught me staring, and smiled. That same easy, infuriating, wonderful smile. And my heart just knew. This was home. Not the apartment, not the city, Kim star. Months later, when he dropped to one knee in the middle of our cluttered living room, holding out a ring with shaking hands and a grin that could have melted the polar ice caps, I didn't even let him finish his speech before blurting out, yes. Because the truth was, I'd known my answer long before that moment. I'd known the night he kissed me in our quiet, messy apartment. Maybe even before that. Because sometimes, the thing you're fighting hardest to ignore ends up being the one thing you can't live without. #epilogue. Jess cried at the wedding. Ugly, hiccuping sobs that had my mom offering her tissues and my dad looking vaguely alarmed. You're just so grown up, she wailed, clutching my arm. And I hate him slightly less now. Nate, for his part, spent the entire reception grinning like an idiot and telling anyone who'd listened that he'd married up. And maybe he had. But as I stood there, dancing barefoot under the fairy lights, his arms around me, I couldn't help but think that I was the lucky one. Because sometimes, life hands you exactly what you didn't know you needed. Even if it comes in the form of a loud, infuriating, impossibly lovable roommate from hell.